Well, hello again. It's been 2 weeks since the last video. I've been very busy, pleasantly busy, lots of fun things, not enough time to be making some videos. But my life is full of creative things at the moment, so I really can't complain. Thursday nights, life drawing continues to be a wonderful constant. Gorgeous bunch of people that I'm drawing with, really lovely models. It's just a very warm and collaborative creative space. So I love the life drawing. And I've been doing a bit of work to try and get ready for opening up my studio for the Open Studios program here, which means I've been sort of deviating a little bit away from the purely children's book related illustrations. Not entirely, but I've been exploring Silver Point again, and in particular it's a new piece that's going to replace the black and white version of, that's Willow by the way, black and white illustration that wasn't quite going where I wanted it to, and I had a big tanty about it in a previous video. But I'm really happy with where this Silver Point piece is going. I finished off a really fun illustration that was inspired by a Radiohead song called Weird Fishes. Really happy with the way that turned out, and I think that's going to be the start of a little bit of a series. I've got a few ideas on that front, and yeah, lots of fun things. I'm just going to let the dog out, otherwise she's just going to keep barking. I'll be right back. Okay, but in this video, I thought it might be fun to talk about the importance of thumbnails in composition. So I was going through some of my old sketchbooks and finding some scribbles and things that were the origins of some more finished pieces down the road. And I don't think I necessarily use thumbnails to their full potential, so I wanted to talk a little bit about that. And I thought we could do some drawing together. That could be fun. We might. I'll come up with a little bit of a prompt, and maybe you can draw some thumbnails, and we can compare our ideas. I think that could be a fun little exercise if you're up for it. But we might start by just having a quick look through some examples of thumbnails from my sketchbooks and some of the illustrations that they led to. And in some cases, they may not have gone, the thumbnail might have just been the kernel of an idea that led to something completely different, but that's one of the powers of thumbnails. So let's have a look at some examples. So I'll be honest, a lot of my thumbnails are probably a little bit more worked up than they need to be. And we can have a look at some examples when we get to our little exercise in a moment. But here's a couple that caught my eye, that were attempts to try and catch very quickly the composition for an idea that was in my head around some kind of beautiful fairy style dwelling inside a forest. And the thumbnail gives me the benefit of being able to identify what the layers might look like. So I wanted to frame it with something dark in the foreground, looking sort of through these curtain of trees to what would become the focus for that illustration. So I think both of these ended up turning into more finished pieces. And if I can find them, I'll show them on the side here. And you can see certainly enough in this thumbnail to know essentially what the composition might look like, but also what the value range might look like. So value range being sort of light to darks, where the darks work best, where the lighter values can perhaps draw a little bit of attention. So there's a couple just to get things started. And then here's some more recent ones from, I think this is my current sketchbook that's still in progress. And it was again just trying to explore ideas for something around this forest slash river spirit idea that I had. I was writing down some words here to try and nail down where I was going and the idea of the format. I've got large format ink, small silver point pieces, and these again sort of slightly more worked up thumbnails, but again just trying to play around with composition, figure. And in this case, I was using a little bit of reference for some of these models, absolutely. But again, as thumbnail serving as a place to explore quickly some ideas without having to commit too much. Let's have a look and see. I think there's some other ways to see how this piece developed. Yeah, so you can see here that I'm sort of getting a little bit closer to what ended up being the abandoned piece of the river spirit, sort of shoulder deep in water. And I'm playing around here with this idea of the reflections in the ripples on the water when you look in nice and closely, containing all of these very cute little characters, which when I started inking those, I realized, what was I thinking? It's a lot of work. And then I was playing around a little bit more. These are more sort of studies rather than thumbnails of what the main figure could look like. And then here again you can see I'm just playing around with composition, this idea that maybe she's more of a mermaid, and what might be these parts of her tail forming this little bit of a design, little pattern here going down. This is very close. This one here I think is a thumbnail that you might recognize as being a lot closer to the piece that I can put here so you can see. And here thinking more about what it might like be if there was concentric circles of these figures around the main one, and then or maybe what it might look like if there was a more obvious connection between the main figure and some of the other smaller river spirits. So there's just two of these spirits that are in some kind of consultation with the river queen, perhaps that's what it is. And here's some more that we just haven't actually turned into anything yet. This idea of some adventurers stumbling upon a dragon out in the wilderness. So you can see they're very, very scratchy. I started off with some pencil, then we just went back over with ink to try and get a little bit of an idea more of the figures. So here are the three figures in the foreground, and playing around with just sort of the layers and the dragon as the main focus. Mountains in the background. Here, the idea that perhaps the adventurers are completely oblivious to the fact that the dragon is watching over their shoulder, and some more sort of very action-orientated thumbnails. Again, exploring ideas, exploring composition, all of these things really low-cost ways of determining whether an idea is actually going to become a full illustration or not. And then here are some that I found that I realised very, very close to the more finished pieces I end up working. I had this idea of creating an illustration for each of the chapters from The Hobbit that was eventually going to form a little bit of a folio that I could shop around. Bilbo and his encounter with the spiders and the moment that his sword got its famous name, and the meeting of Gandalf and Bilbo at Bag End. The illustration for this one, which I can show, ended up taking a slightly different angle on it, but again, the thumbnail, this is a very much more of a study than a thumbnail, I accept, but it certainly gave me a chance to play around with what could eventually work. There's some others in here too, and this one very almost identical, I think, really, to what I ended up doing as the final piece, and I really like the composition for this one. Again, that moment where Thorin is confronting the trolls who have captured all of his dwarven companions. And this is a piece that didn't end up working, and this is just the Bilbo and the dwarves riding through Mirkwood, and I just couldn't quite get the composition quite right in balance. The top part of it just wasn't quite working for me. But you know, these are reasonably quick, and I don't feel like I've wandered down a very long path that ultimately is disappointing if I'm just playing around with these ideas. All right, so it's time for the Let's Draw Together part of the video, and I thought it would be fun to give you a little bit of a prompt and see what you can come up with. We might do this in two stages. One really, really quick, where you give yourself maybe 30 seconds at most for, say, 4 thumbnails based on a particular prompt. And then we might do a second part where we try and maybe work up one a little bit more, just to see where it goes. The thing we're going to try and do here is focus purely on composition, that is where the different elements are going to be in the illustration to tell the story, and a little bit around the value study, that is where you're going to put your darks and your lights to try and create this nice moody piece that potentially has a focal point. And we can talk about good placement of focal points and those sorts of things as we go. So I'll put the prompt up on the screen, and what you could do if you wanted to is just pause the video at this point and then come back and we can compare how we went with our thumbnails. So here's your opportunity to pause now. Now, if you're still unpaused, then we can work through this together, and that's fine. I like to I like to draw out my boxes for my thumbnails rather than just divide my page up into quarters. I think quarters is probably good for this size. And the reason I like to do that is because I like to be able to see where elements might just go outside the borders. And it means you're not as constrained by trying to fit everything inside here. You can think about what things might overlap, and I find that it's a lot more liberating. So the prompt in this case being a princess or a maid of a court who has sort of escaped out of the castle to go and visit a wise tree spirit on a hill. I had this idea that it would be nice to be able to have this meeting, this discussion between the princess and the tree spirit, sort of the focal point, but give a really good sense of depth and tell the story of where this person's come from, and the fact that setting the scene for this being some kind of fanciful fairy tale. So again, if we sort of set ourselves a little bit of a timer for some 30-second type ones, then you really can't afford to focus anything. You can't afford to look at detail. It's really just about big shapes in this case. And so I'm thinking, again, if I've got this side here will probably be my tree spirit to start off with, sitting on a little bit of a hill. I'll get that little bit of a sense of it there. I don't really know what the tree spirit might look like, but I'm imagining it's probably going to be a face carved into the tree, like so. And then I might have my princess figure sort of coming, just appearing over this rise here. Allow for some hair and maybe a little bit of a crown to show her regal heritage, her royal heritage, possibly accompanied by a horse. Again, this is very, 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 very quick. And then sort of picking my horizon line somewhere around about here so that I can put a little bit of a castle back there. So we want to show that it's sort of nice and far away. We might have some nice fluffy white fairy tale clouds in the background, and then a sense of this forest that she might have traveled through to get to this point, and maybe a little bit of a windy road there. So I don't know if that's 30 seconds or not, but it's pretty close. So that's a start. Now the purpose of thumbnails again is just to explore lots of different ideas, and you can do that by just shifting around where the different components might be. So in this case, we can try one with the tree on this side, see what that might look like, and perhaps rather than have the princess appearing over the rise, we might have her sort of just kneeling down here in conversation with the tree. Again, somewhere up back here can be our castle, maybe some mountains. There's our fluffy clouds. There's our forest. All right, so there's two. Let's go for another one, and this time we might, in this case, we might have the tree as the central piece here. with the princess sort of again in consultation here, either standing or kneeling in front of the tree. And we might have in this case, the horizon line further back behind the tree, and maybe the castle on this side, like so. And we might consider this area might also have been cast in shadow from the tree. All right, let's think of one more orientation. Maybe we can go with a tree, but this time a lot more twisted and higher up on this little cropping on the hill, like so. So almost looking down on the princess figure who's standing here, like so. You can sort of see the horse has already disappeared as the potential idea, but maybe there's the hint of the horse and she's holding the reins of the horse, like so. And maybe the horizon line's a lot flatter on this one. And again, just the hint of the castle in the background, because we want to show her origins. We want to be able to show that she's travelled a long distance here. And that leaves lots of nice room for clouds and things in the background. And my idea for this piece was going to be doing just black and white pen and ink one initially, in which case this gives me lots of scope to do some really intricate fine lines and play around with the texture in the bark and play around with the clouds. I wonder if your thumbnails looked any different to that. I would very, very much like to see some examples of what you came up with if people are willing to share. That would be amazing. Okay, let's have a quick think about part two. And part two might be, all right, let's choose one of these that we kind of like, and maybe we'll work it up in a little bit more detail. So this time we might give ourselves a couple of minutes rather than just that 30 seconds. I think I might just go with this first one, to be honest. That was kind of like my first image in my head, so I might just explore that to see where it goes. So that's my number one, and then another time I might work up this one too. I don't mind that as a interesting, twisted, different version. Again, going back to this idea of composition, you can also think about, there's a classic rule of thirds composition. So if you think about dividing your page up into thirds, both horizontally and vertically, you're kind of looking in these spaces here to see where the points of interest could be placed in your illustration. So it's not a hard and fast rule, but it's often a useful way to just check whether or not your composition isn't too lopsided, or everything, you're essentially leaving a lot of empty space that isn't drawing the viewer's eye. So in all of these, as I do this exercise, and again, I'm doing this after because I don't want to be constrained too much by these boxes. I can see that this one probably fits the best, with the castle being closest to this point, the princess sitting smack bang on that point there, and our tree spirit here clearly fitting in nicely on that thirds line there. This one not as strong, but obviously the princess sitting in that space. Maybe the tree could be moved over a little bit more in this case, and maybe the horizon line's a little higher to bring the castle in. Again, I'm not going to be slavish to this particular rule, but it's just another way to quickly check where the different elements sit in your composition. For this one here, again, the castle close, tree spirit close, princess close. So it's sitting all right in that one. This one, because it's much more central, probably the rule of thirds isn't quite as appropriate. Back to working up this one. So in this case, I'm gonna work this up as a slightly larger, not much larger, but in this case, I'm definitely thinking a portrait orientation. So there's my frame, and I'm just going to work up this idea of this foreground little rise of a hill being like the first thing that helps us set the different layers, the different depths in this illustration. And so in this case, I can probably play around a little bit more with the shape of my tree and make it a little bit more interesting. Again, I'm not going to be spending too much time on this, a few minutes at most, but you know, it's a chance to just take an idea to slightly the next level and just check whether the design is actually working. Yeah, so that's kind of fine there, and then I can think about the foliage of this particular tree is probably going to sit up in here, like so, and I don't know whether this is a male tree spirit or a female tree spirit, or whether it matters in the slightest. We just can put a little bit of a face there as the clear indication that this is something beyond just a cool, twisted looking tree. Let's put our princess in here, and might have her, sort of maybe her torso facing in this direction, and she's sort of twisting, and a little bit of a curve to the bottom half there, just to show a little bit of movement, and here holding on to the reins of what could be her horse companion. Really derpy looking horse at the moment, but that's okay. I'll probably use some reference for that when I get there. But it tells a little bit of the story of how this princess has got out this far, her commitment to travelling to get the wise words from the tree spirit, requiring a little bit of travel by horse. And all right, so now we're thinking about our horizon line. You're probably doing, that's probably too centered, so maybe lower. Let's try lower, like so. I think if you can avoid your horizon line being smack bang in the middle of your piece, it's best. I don't know much about the detail of the castle here, but I want to try and establish scale. So if I add enough detail here, it'll help sell how far away the castle is. Okay, so here's my, sorry, the edge of the forest that she's been traveling through, and that windy road that's got her to this particular point. I want to have some reasonably interesting hills in the background, and then space for these cool fairy style clouds. And there we go. I don't need much more than that at this stage. I can play a little bit around with what might be in this foreground, and I imagine it'll be lots of dappled light on the grass cast by the foliage above. And there's not a lot more to do here. I might just block in some of what will be the main value differences here. So I'm expecting the tree will be the darkest part here, with potentially a little bit of light just falling on the face just to really help draw the eye to it. But I want the foreground elements to be as dark as possible, which allows, the background elements can be a lot lighter, a lot less detailed, so that they help sink back into that background. That's enough really for me to want to get started on a larger format illustration and play around a lot more with the details, look at reference, and do all of those sorts of things when I'm committing to the next piece. So maybe that'll be something we can do in the next video. So there you go. I hope that was a bit of fun. I enjoyed that actually. No idea where any of those thumbnails will go. Hopefully one of them might turn into some fun new illustration, or maybe a couple of them might turn into something more than just those quick scratchings in the pad. If you want to know a little bit more, explore some more about thumbnails, be happy to chat about that. Just let me know in the comments. There's some great artists out there with fabulous command of thumbnails and really understand the disposable nature of them and how they are absolutely service to what might be the final illustration. You just can't afford to get too attached to them. It's about getting ideas down on the paper as quickly as possible. All right, that's enough of me rambling on about thumbnails. Simple pleasure for this week, something I enjoyed at this very table yesterday, and that was some lightly toasted bread with avocado and some salt and pepper on top. Done. So simple, and a pleasure. And I know that I'm focusing a lot on food when I talk about my simple pleasures, but hey, can't help myself. Food's awesome. So thanks for joining me today. I had fun drawing with you. I hope you had fun too. If you'd like to see more videos like this, please let me know. I would be extremely pleased to do more like this. Maybe not focusing on thumbnails, maybe focusing on something else about composition or technique, anything that you like, really. Okay, I will see you in 2 weeks' time.